So a lot of you guys out there are thinking about getting a C8 Corvette Z06, or at this point maybe dreaming about getting a C8 Corvette Z06, but somebody on the mid-engine Corvette forum just recently got a C8 Corvette Z06, and they're coming from just a base C8, and they share their day one observations. So let's go through this entire list and talk about what you can expect moving from a C8 to a C8 Corvette Z06. All right, guys, so over at the midenginecorvetteforum.com, we have a user that just recently bought a new Z06 coming from a C8 Corvette Z51. So your base model Corvette with that track edition Z51 package. Now, there's two different things we're going to unfold with this particular post, this particular user, because he also is the first person to buy a 1LZ Z07 packaged Z06. So he is basically number one off of the line as far as that particular configuration is concerned. We're going to talk a little bit about why he went with the 1LZ, how that stacks up against some of the 3LZ counterparts, and we're also going to talk about his experience moving from the base C8 to the Z06 because it is a pretty massive change. The biggest one, of course, is going to be suspension. We've talked about it in the past how the Z06 is going to be a little bit stiffer than the base C8, but the Z07 package car is going to be even stiffer than just your Z06. He has a Z07 package car, so we're going to talk a lot about his experience with that setup and how much different it is from the Z51 C8. So, without further ado, let's jump into this post on the midenginecorvetteforum.com. So the user over at the midenginecorvetteforum.com, his name is appropriately 2023 Z07. And he starts off his forum post by saying day one observations of a Z51 to a Z06. He says, I picked up my Z06 today. Unbelievable car as expected, plus the R8C experience was top-notch. In my first 40 miles, here's what I noticed. The interior dash chrome trim on the 1LT is pronounced, whereas on the 1LZ, it's more of a brushed look, and he really likes it. I will, of course, include the pictures here on screen that he has in his thread so you guys can see exactly what it is he's talking about. The AC controls are also more of a matte on the Z06 versus the C8 Z51. This is actually something pretty cool. I have not noticed this before. This is something you would not notice unless you have a Z06, I suppose, but I haven't noticed this in any pictures or any videos that I've done with the car. Apparently, all those controls down the right-hand side of the driver's side are a little bit more on the matte side, so it gives it less of a reflection, which is pretty cool. He says the competition seat leg bolsters on the Z06 are way less aggressive, which so far seems to be more comfortable for normal daily driving, which is, again, pretty interesting. As you guys know, my C8 Corvette, I did have the competition seats in there. I really like them. I really appreciate the amount of grip that they have, but I never really noticed any issues with the leg bolsters. I also have sat in the Z06 with the competition seats and didn't notice any difference in the seats directly. But this user is saying that the competition seats have apparently less aggressive leg bolsters. The LT2 makes a good low-end torque. When you manually shift the Z06, you really shouldn't be shifting below 2,500 RPM. It's just not making torque, and the engine struggles to pull the car up to speed. So this one is by far the most interesting part of this entire observation on the Mid-Engine Corvette forum, because this is where you start to really understand where the pros and cons of the flat plane crank engine live. So the flat plane crank, as you guys know, does not create torque quite like a typical V8 engine does. So with this in mind, we want to keep that engine at higher RPM. Obviously, that's where this thing shines. There is a reason it redlines at 8,600 RPM, and you should be in the higher RPM if you want to keep this thing moving like it should. But this is one of those things that not many of us actually think about. When you're daily driving and kind of just driving through town, you're going to still want this car to be at higher RPM to make sure that that power is always readily available. Your typical Corvette has always had a bunch of torque, so this is not something that you're going to be necessarily 100% used to jumping from a Corvette of the past to the new Z06. It is definitely a different experience. I really like that he has pointed that out because that is one of those observations that pretty much all of us are going to notice right away, but if you don't have the car or you have never driven a Corvette before, it's not something that's going to be on your mind. Moving on with the observations though, he says that the crackles and the pops are way more mellow on the Z06. Maybe I just got used to the full bolt-ons and all the noise that comes with it on my 1LT that he used to have. Again, this is interesting because the Z06 exhaust, as you guys I'm sure have heard a million times by now, sounds absolutely insane. And he's saying that it's actually a little more mellow than his modded Z51 1LT. Now, he doesn't say his mods that he had, so I'm not sure exactly what he's referring to. If he had catless headers or anything like that, I suppose the base C8 exhaust would be a little bit more, but either way, the Z06 exhaust sounds insane. So if he's saying it's kind of mellow, I'm kind of curious as to exactly what his build was like on his C8. The next one again is pretty interesting as well because it really starts talking about that suspension. He says that the Z07 mag ride is pretty stiff. Sport is like a Z51 in track mode plus some. And the track mode on the Z06s feel close to my KW V5s that he used to have on the Z51. So for those of you who don't know, those are kind of a coilover setup, something a lot more aggressive than what the car came with stock. So once again, if he had that kind of setup on his base C8, odds are good he probably went pretty crazy with the exhaust as well. So we can kind of assume these things based on that. Either way, it is definitely interesting that he is saying that the Z07 mag ride is stiffer than that coilover setup. Definitely a car built for the track, which we already knew, but if you guys want to daily drive it on the road, in tour mode, apparently it does soften up quite a bit. Moving on, he says that the carbon ceramic brakes feel nearly identical to his full AP big brake kit so far. Again, obviously he modded the crap out of his base C8 Corvette. He had an AP big brake kit on it. And if that's the case, comparing those to the carbon ceramic rotors, if you guys haven't driven a Corvette in the past with a carbon ceramic rotor setup, it is definitely different. I had a C7 Corvette Z06 with the Z07 package. The carbon ceramic setup was insane on there. Then I got the C7 Corvette ZR1, obviously also has carbon ceramic rotors, and it is pretty much the same between those two cars, but they are definitely different than driving a car with a iron brake setup. They bite a lot more instantly, and obviously you don't have any of that brake dust, which is pretty cool. The next thing he says is that in Z mode, with the trans turned all the way to aggressive, it really likes to hold cruising speed gears at a high RPM. It's borderline a bit too much, and he will probably have to turn it down. I was driving normally in my neighborhood at 30 miles per hour, and it wanted to be singing at 5,000 RPM the whole time. Again, guys, this kind of factors back to when we were talking about that low-end torque and how you want to be at a higher RPM to really be in the power band of this car. That's why this car is going to absolutely know what RPM it should be at a cruising speed, especially if you're in sport mode or track mode. It's going to hold the RPM higher because that's where the power band's at. On the Corvettes of the past, it wasn't always this way. You could definitely hammer the throttle at 2,000 RPM and it had enough torque to push it through, but with the flat plane crank engine, you're going to be riding at a higher RPM most of the time, thus also using more gas. I know a lot of people have talked about it so far that this particular car is fairly thirsty, meaning it uses a lot of gas, and this is why. Now, again, I know none of us are buying this car because of the gas mileage, but at the same time, these are things to be aware of. Next, he says that his competition driver's seat already has 2 creases in it, which is a little annoying, especially since, you know, obviously the price of the car. It's unfortunate that right off the bat, these 2 creases are popping up, but he's going to wait and see if it straightens itself out after some use. Now, with the base C8, this has been an issue before. We have had some people talking about creases and uneven stitching and stuff like that that ended up having to be warrantied by GM. This is probably the same kind of thing. If I had to guess, it will get taken care of one way or another. These cars are not necessarily going to be 100% perfect, but with GM's warranty, assuming you didn't buy it secondhand from somebody who didn't have it at least 6 months, we'll take care of it for you. His last bit is that he is fairly certain that this is the first 1LZ made. We talked about that a little bit in the beginning there, guys. This is, from what I can tell, the first 1LZ off the actual production line for consumer purchase. And if you're going for a full-blown track car, the 1LZ is probably the way to go. It is going to weigh the least amount. He said he will update it as he thinks of more, but what do you guys think? I'm curious your thoughts on this. The car is awesome spec. I really, really love the look of it. He went with a hypersonic gray exterior, the gray calipers, which obviously pretty closely match that hypersonic gray, and then just the black Z06 wheels with that Z07 package. Obviously, all the aero bits. Car looks absolutely stunning. Personally, I would have done a 3LZ, but if he's going for a track build, he's obviously looking to get a lightweight car, and he nailed it. I am always interested to hear the experience moving from one car to another, and in this case, this is one of those ones that I'm sure you guys are going to want to hear of too, because it is what all of you are considering to do, most likely. If you're not moving from a C8 to a C8 Z06, you're probably moving from some other Corvette to the new Z06, and the experience here is going to be something you're going to want to hear. Now, I will update this video as well as he updates his experience online here. Like I said, it's a really cool thing to go along with someone else's experience, especially when you can't get your hands on the car. So for now, that's going to do it for the video, guys. If you liked what you saw, smash that thumbs up button. Let me know you're liking the content so we can keep doing these kind of things. Let me know your thoughts down below on the 1LZ Z07 package car that this particular user purchased. I will link the Mid-Engine Corvette forum in the description as well, so you guys can see this particular user's experience the entire time as well. So if you want to check it out, look in that description below. If you guys haven't subscribed yet, please do. I'm going to have loads of content like this coming you're not going to want to miss. And as always, guys, I will catch you in the next upload.